So, Book 1, Canto 1, the Book of Beginnings, the symbol dawn. So, Sri Aurobindo in the story itself reveals here in the very first canto that in this, uh, whatever experience is describing, the coming of the dawn, the whole story of mankind in a nutshell he has given there. And what is the story of mankind? It's a constant growth out of darkness towards light. The assurance of the eventual victory of the light over darkness is something we all need. The triumph of truth, and above all, the plunge of love into the abyss to rescue it out of the darkness, out of the chaos, out of the disintegrating ferment in which it had gone. So, this is what is described in a very beautiful way through a symbol which every day we experience and see, but we do not take note of. No, darkness is there, but darkness goes away and light comes. Some people will say that, but light also goes away and darkness comes, isn't it? So go back to the origin. If you go back to the origin of creation, we will know that there was a all pervading darkness with all fulfilling oneness inside. But when it burst forth, that is a different kind of darkness. When it burst forth, the first thing which emerges is light. So you know that nebula which is full of energy and that sun, this is the eternal reality. Then the play of day and night starts. See, if we look at the how the solar system is formed, now we experience day and night. So which came first? Day or night? Day came, light came. It's a physical reality. It is out of sun that all the planets were thrown out successively. The sun gave birth to all the planets. Out of the sun they all emerged and started rotating around it. This is a physical fact. We are satellites of the sun. But once we were thrown far and far and far, we started experiencing night and night and night. We, there were no individuals. We as a, I mean the, whatever, creation. Creation started experiencing, and we as being part of, because we have always existed in some form or the other. We are children of sun. So we have, I mean, literally, that's why the sun is so much life giving, rejuvenating. So in ancient times, you will see that people used to worship sun. And so, was it the physical sun they were worshipping? Some people asked once that, is it supramental or is it physical? So, the thing is that our ancients didn't draw that kind of strict definition as we today with modern mind do it. It is either this or that. So, they looked at things through another eye, a more complete eye, with wholeness. So, when we look at wholeness, everything upon earth in creation is a symbol. Look at the galaxy. Must have seen the images of the galaxy. Look at the galaxy, it's moving, whirling like the Sudarshan Chakra. Actually, it is like that. Milky Way. It's strange way, it's like a spiral, and it's so beautiful to look at it from a wider view. So, so it is the sun which is at once physical, it is at once an occult truth, it is at once the highest spiritual reality of the supramental truth. At once. All these three together. So just as when we worship Nar, in some way or the other we are trying to connect to the Narayana. So when we worship the physical sun, the ancients knew that we can, through the sun, symbol of sun, we can reach out to the greater truth behind. So why they needed to worship through these veils? Because we are not ready for the real thing. See, why do we go to temple and worship all the images, idols? Some people say that, there is no need to worship. But can we behold that reality which is so powerful? So we start with a symbol and we proceed to the greater truth behind. When man will embody that greater truth, then there will be no more need to approach through the physical. So all these truths Sri Aurobindo packs through the image. So the image is revealing to us something. It is writing a story, telling us a story. That's how he puts it. That almost that day the epiphany was disclosed. So it is telling us a story. Every day morning and sun comes and tells us a story. But we don't know the story. We forget because we are too busy with our routine task. All that he will describe. So we get up, we don't care to listen to the first teacher who is coming and telling us something. So we'll now read this story. Savitri is the story of the Divine Mother. Savitri is the story of creation. And the Savitri is our story. All these at the same time. So we'll start with the symbol dawn. So in the beginning he has clarified, it's a dawn. He is describing the day, morning, dawn. But it is a symbol. So what is this symbol of? That we will see as we proceed. Like all great things, the journey starts from a darkness. See, that is the difference. When one has to struggle through darkness, the plant, it has to struggle through darkness. Why? Because so that when it comes to the surface, it is ready for the light. So that is how the journey starts. It was the hour before the gods awake. Now this one line, Mother has explained in a very beautiful way. The whole story of creation is there in this one line. So what is the hour before the gods awake? We have this, physically is describing the Bela which is known as Brahma Muhurt. So Brahma Muhurt mein, even the gods are sleeping. All the gods of different, when we wake up, different gods become active in all the parts of creation. So even the gods are not awake. Mother speaks of before the creation. Before this creation, there have been other creations which have plunged in pralaya into darkness. Just like individuals die and are reborn, nations die and are reborn, civilizations die and are reborn. So also, whole creation is plunged into darkness and is reborn. So before it is reborn, there is a state of nothingness, dissolution, utter dissolution. But something, just as after death, everything does not die, something remains. So similarly, something remains. And that something has to now, through the help of memory, recover itself. So that's the time. And she describes in a beautiful story that when the will for creation came up, so out of the one divine, four beings emerged: light, life, consciousness, bliss. So they plunged into darkness. They plunged into creation. But each being began to think very soon that I am separate. I am all powerful. I am the greatest power. So the moment it felt like that, there is no thought then. It entered deep inside, finally cut off from the one, and entered into a state of utter self-oblivion. Because all the power, all the strength, everything comes from the one. And the moment we forget that, even the greatest God, he cannot do anything. That's the story of the Kena Upanishad also. So it plunges and slowly changes into its very opposite. See, this is a very interesting story. So it changes into its opposite. So truth becomes falsehood. Consciousness becomes unconsciousness. Life becomes death. And bliss becomes suffering. Now the interesting part is the difference between the divine and the indivine is only a question of forgetting the one. That is the origin. If you forget the one, that's what it is said. It division, Daitya, Diti, Aditya, undivided consciousness. So if you remember the one, you are safe zone. If you don't remember the one, division starts and you plunge into darkness. So it goes into darkness and then there is an SOS, help. And in response to the SOS, a second line of beings come out, emerge of the divine, who are the gods. So these beings are given this mission impossible, rescue. So they say that, look, you are asking us to rescue these creatures, we know what has happened. So give us that power, most intense light of yours which is in your heart. Then we will go. So that mother, out of her heart's core, the most beautiful, brilliant, the purest, the purest of the purest, because everything is wonderful and beautiful. She gives that light. And behind the light, all the gods follow. So what is that light? That from the mother's heart, it is that which will become the psychic essence in creation. And eventually the psychic being. Okay, and all the gods are the different powers who will assist creation now to pull it out of the state of oblivion. So this is the story. So she, along with the psychic, all these beings have to come out. Now you see again in this story something very interesting. It is the very mission of the psychic to rescue creation out of darkness. So once we know it, we won't want to escape, because this is our original will. It has come for that. And gods are our assistants. And always with every soul, you will see these two things sticking along. One is all the goodness, beauty, light. On the other hand, all that is dark, divisive forces, because it's rescuing it. It has come for that. And as it grows, the darkness will diminish and the light will increase. So this is the story. So the first line is describing that moment before the second line, the gods have come. So it was the hour before the gods awake. Across the path of the divine event. Again, very interesting line. Divine event, right at the beginning, Sri Aurobindo is making it clear that creation is a divine event. It is not an accident. It is not chance. It is not chaos. It's not Maya. It is a divine event. But now, in the unfolding of the divine event, there is something which stands between the divine event which is going to be or is going to unfold. Something has come to prevent that event from happening. Across the path of the divine event, the huge, foreboding mind of night, alone in her unlit temple of eternity. See, every line is so evocative. Unlit temple of eternity. We look for temples here and there. The original temple of the Lord is this universe. Star-studded temple. No? Yeah?
Canto 1, so this the hour before the gods awake is described, that hour
That hour.
is described in Canto 1.
At the same time, you will see the image follow closely the physical journey. That's why it's a symbol. So, you see, this is the style of Vedic imagery. Vedic poets described like that. So, the deeper meaning was left for the initiates. And for the uninitiate, there were two kinds of, Vedvadins and the Veda knowers. So, people have a lot of conflicting views about it. They say, oh, Shri Krishna also condemned the Vedas. He didn't condemn the Vedas. He would not. He condemned the Vedvadins. So you will see there are Vedvadins who know the outer thing. So you will see there are people who have learned how to recite, they will recite everything they will do. But they don't understand the deeper meaning of the Vedas. So in India we had this parallel tradition. There were those who preserved the tradition. आप कहीं आराम से नीचे भी बैठ सकते हैं बैक में हाँ श्योर अदरवाइज फील कंफर्टेबल जस्ट स्ट्रेच आउट सो there were those who were just preserving the tradition by oral tradition. So oral tradition were all about images, rishis asking for cow, horses, very good. But those who knew the meaning, they knew that the cows and horses are not the physical cows and horses. They are also needed. They are part of our wealth of those times. But it's about light and strength. So he's describing at once the dawn of creation. And he's also describing everyday morning because he is to connect with the event. What is the event which is going to take place? Satyavan's death. He'll disclose at the end. Now the interesting part is Satyavan's death is also a divine event. But that will come to later. Right now it's about creation. There is a divine act which is going to take place. And like all great authors, something is going to happen. And what is that? That's a divine event. What is the divine event? If you look at it outwardly, Satyavan is going to die. How can death be a divine event? But he will say that through passing through death, there will be the victory. So all that will unfold. In her unlit temple of eternity, lay stressed immobile upon silence, Marge. Almost one felt opaque, impenetrable. In this somber symbol of her eyeless muse, the abysm of the unbodied infinite. Now see, every line is so evocative. This is a very power-packed passage. It's describing now the inconscient state in which creation is plunged. In the somber symbol of her eyeless muse. This is a muse who is going to create the divine sleeping in the inconscient. Creation is to emerge from there, but he is neither able to see nor able to think, conceive. Nothing is there, and yet creation will emerge out of that. This mother is described in one of her experiences, and she has used the word the first avatar, the divine sleeping in the inconscient, out of whom creation is emerging. And there is a reason why he has gone into sleep. A fathomless zero occupied the world, a power of fallen boundless self awake. Between the first and the last nothingness. So that's what we are describing, the first nothingness. Before creation came, but that nothingness is pregnant with the all conscient. It has no form, nothing. You can't define it with anything. That first nothingness, when somebody asked Sri Aurobindo the shunyam of the Buddhists and the one of the Advaitin, is it the same? He said yes. Then he said, but why does Yagnvalk speak of nothingness as the highest state? He says, what he means is that there is no way you can describe it or recognize it in any known terms of the mind. It's like, it's very difficult to describe even something which, you are awestruck with something. And suddenly somebody asks you, describe that scene. You fumble for words. So at the most you will say, oh, I'm just overwhelmed. So that first nothingness is that state where nothing corresponds to the human consciousness there. Neti, neti, iti, iti. There is nothing which corresponds. So it is nothingness. And then it has plunged into inconscient, that is the other nothingness. And life moves between these two. So that is the whole journey. recalling the tenebrous womb from which it came, turned from the insoluble mystery of birth and the tardy process of mortality, and longed to reach its end in vacant knot. So, tenebrous womb out of inconscient creation is emerging, but it has a tendency, like again gravitation, to go back. Tardy process. Oof, once again, you have to be born. See, there are people, that's why great yogis like Shankaracharya wrote Punarapi Janmam, Punarapi Marnam, Punarapi Janani Jathare Shenam. Again, this process. Anybody with little sense would feel, I have to come back again, though it is very sobering. Because you obviously get rid of all these attachments, because you realize there is nothing which is so permanent. But we who believe in rebirth, just imagine that we have to come again. One way to look at it, we are given another chance, which can make us lazy or which can make us also that let me gather as much as I can in one life. But on the other hand, this whole idea that how many times to come again and again. So tardy process, because it's a slow process. And long to reach its end in vacant knot, so it wants to go back. Now imagine when we wake up. What is the first state? Supposing we wake up very early. Actually, morning starts post midnight if you see technically. Technically it is like that, no? But at 12:30 if you get up, you'll say, let me sleep off again. Because you are still emerging from the drowse. See how many levels the symbol will apply. Similarly, when we turn to yoga, the first tendency is, except exceptional beings who are suddenly lit by the fire, the first tendency is we continue our normal life, everything the way we are. After a while, we cannot much dwell upon the name of God. We have a tendency to forget, go back, because we are more comfortable with this. That's our natural state. So there is a tendency in it to slip back. And he's describing a very beautiful passage here. As in a dark beginning of all things. So when there is darkness, we should know that it is the beginning of a new creation. Wherever you see a great destruction, that means there is a equally powerful new creation which is going to come up. Because in God's wisdom, that is how it operates. A mute, featureless semblance of the unknown, repeating forever the unconscious act, prolonging forever the unseeing will. See, now here again we have the symbol applied at many levels. So after some time when we wake up, what is our first state? Very mechanical. We go to the bathroom, we do things very mechanically. Creation also repeats mechanical act. By memory of the past, everything will start moving. When we have even turned to the divine in the beginning, it's all mechanical. We do certain things very ritualistically. There is no deep meaning inside it, but doesn't matter. And this is an answer to people who say, oh, they are just doing mechanical worship. I said, what does it matter? That's how people begin. Who are we to judge? Sometimes, people would, I've heard things like, oh, these people, they just go to the ashram to bow their head at the samadhi. Okay, it's okay. First of all, we don't know what's going on inside. But even if one is doing that, it is a beginning. Who knows what is happening inside? As in a dark beginning of all things, repeating forever the unconscious act. So mechanically, human beings start like that. And because Indian thought recognized it, that is why you see it permitted all shades and steps of the spiritual endeavor, right from worshipping a tree and a stone and the sun and the moon to the highest form of internalized worship of the divine. From divine as animal and material object to divine as the supreme is there in Indian thought, and there's something very beautiful, because depending on your tantra actually speaks of it. These three levels through which we worship. So, this is the first step of creation. Cradle the cosmic drowse of ignorant force, whose moved creative slumber kindles the suns and carries our lives in its somnambulist whirl. So, this is a very interesting line, cosmic drowse of ignorant force. So, if you ask a material scientist, he will say it's all the working of nature. You don't have to bring in high philosophy behind it. Nature is God. And nature, how does it work? Nature is ignorant. It is jad. But the big question is, if nature is ignorant, it is mechanical and jad, how such a beautiful, meaningful, consciousnessful universe is emerging out of it? The only way you can understand it is that nature is a front. Behind it, there is the all consciousness. That's the only way you can really understand it. Otherwise, this gap remains. So, there is the ignorant force which takes a form, goes into the front, but because there is hidden in it all the power of the divine Shakti, therefore it kindles the suns. So, it's very beautiful that behind nature there is the divine Shakti. So you see, we use the word we, it's very interesting. Sri Aurobindo is using the word our lives at the very beginning of creation. So we are connected, right from the atoms. So, athwart the vain, enormous trance of space, its formless stupor without mind or life, a shadow spinning through a soulless void, thrown back once more into unthinking dreams. Earth wheeled, abandoned in the hollow gulfs, forgetful of her spirit and her fate. Now you see, slowly the scene is emerging. Zooming. Now it's zooming onto Earth. It is still wheeling, taking the parikrama around the sun. See, that is why perhaps the idea of parikrama came in. So, people often say parikrama karne se kuch nahi hota hai. So, I have this, this not to encourage a mechanical parikrama, but the fact is, Earth parikrama karte karte, it has brought in so much evolutionary possibilities. Because before you reach the sun, you move around and prepare yourself. That is the purpose. So it is doing parikrama of the sun, but doing it mechanically. The soul in it has not yet awakened. The impassive skies were neutral, empty, still. And now the scene changes. Then something in the inscrutable darkness stirred. So you will see that there are different stages through which from the night we emerge towards the light. It is not a sudden process. So we should not be, we have to evolve through many shades of ignorance and grayness. It doesn't happen, so people get very disillusioned if they say, oh, it was doing so well, such nice experiences I was having. Again, no, it is bound to be like that. So, Mother says many illusions are necessary in life. They prepare you for the true thing. Because if we have not gone through that, we are not ready for the real. So, it is slowly beginning to emerge. Then something in the inscrutable darkness stirred, a nameless movement, an unthought idea, insistent, dissatisfied, without a name. Something that wished but knew not how to be, teased the inconscient to wake ignorance. Now you see, it is very interesting. These lines, so many levels it works. I like to connect with Sri Aurobindo's writing psychologically because they bring it very close to me as my life. Otherwise, it becomes philosophy. That is the difference. Psychologically, is practical application of philosophy, like Vedanta and yoga. So now psychologically, I connect with this passage in a very interesting way. And you'll see this today, many youth are feeling restless, dissatisfied. They don't have an idea what they are seeking, but they feel stifled. And human beings also go through that phase, no? When you feel stifled, you don't know, you want something, you don't know what you want. That is the time one can just, move here and there, have some experiments in life, not really realizing what one is looking for. So this stirring, like a baby in the womb, is kicking. Now it's not that it's consciously kicking and saying hello to mama, though mama is very happy that there is a baby inside. But it just kicking. Why is it kicking? It wants to come out of the womb. So this stifled feeling, there's something like a restless movement, something which doesn't know the aim, is a good sign. It is a better sign than the over-satisfied old people of yesterday who were too wise to seek wisdom, too happy with their ignorance, which they thought is wisdom. There's no seeking. We know everything. You tell any, it's a grace to turn towards Sri Aurobindo and the mother. Many people ask, mass movement. I say, it's not a mass movement, please. Because everybody believes that I am very wise, I know everything. So, it is too satisfied. But the moment you feel, no, I want to explore further, why not? Who binds us? There should be no limit to exploring. So, the moment that starts, that means the first stir of dawn. It is not yet an aspiration, but there is some kind of a vague longing, yearning. I don't know, I am not too happy with life. Maybe I am seeking something. Okay, so that is the state of creation. A throe that came and left a quivering trace gave room for an old, tired want unfilled, at peace in its subconscient moonless cave, to raise its head and look for absent light. So this effort is not new. It was there, tired, it slept off. Now it is being woken up. So even after we have, so it also answers that question. No? People say, what if in this life I don't achieve? Doesn't matter. This aspiration will not die. It will be woken up again. The sun will make sure, it will tease, dig into inconscience and wake up. So slowly out of the slumber, an old, tired want, unfilled. Till it is fulfilled, there is no way that one can rest. There is a beautiful line in Savitri. So when somebody asked, so are you resting? So I said, Savitri, there is a line, there is no rest for the embodied soul. Till it has found itself, it cannot rest. Physically we can rest. How can there be rest? For the soul it is constantly striving. So it is being woken up. So just imagine now, look at this at another vast scale. Imagine the divine is waking up creation. Wake up, wake up. All the souls, wake up my children, wake up. So this can be a beautiful image that every day we are being woken up and the whole creation is woken up. At straining closed eyes of vanished memory, like one who searches for a bygone self and only meets the corpse of his desire. It was as though even in this noughts profound, even in this ultimate dissolution's core, there lurked an unremembering entity, survivor of a slain and buried past, condemned to resume the effort and the pang, reviving in another frustrate world. So there is, It's straining. Something is waking up, like children. They don't know. Mama, let me sleep. Who is waking me up? All this sense is there because in that state of, we call it peace, but that's not peace. It is a state of inertia. So it doesn't want to wake up. So it is trying to strain. Who is calling me? But doesn't realize it's a bygone self. It's a past. Like, sometimes people feel they come to the ashram. So a lot of people describe it like that. It was like, we came home, homecoming. It's a very common experience, a lot of people. Now you ask them why. Is it like they give you a very comfortable house like yours? No, 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 not that. Is the food super? No, nothing of that kind. But you feel at home. See, it's very interesting. Why is this feeling like home? It's not that people will be very nice or other things are there. Nothing. But the feeling that you are reconnecting with something or someone whom you are now trying to know, but actually at some level you already know. See, like the Divine Mother. You ask, do you know her? Well, at one level, yes, of course we know. What else is there to know? At another level, do you know her? Who can know her? So, both are equally right. So, one is reviving from there. An unshaped consciousness desired light. So, then out of that vagueness, there is the seeking for light. Now it is becoming more conscious. Still, the aspiration is not born. It is still a vague seeking. So, these are the stages actually you see human beings go through. This vague restlessness, to a lot of youth today restless, is because the new creation, through this they will open up. Then after that will come a seeking for light. So after all this restlessness, they'll say, oh, let there be something beautiful, something peaceful. So that is the next seeking. Seeking is still something vague. And a blank prescience yearn towards distant change. However far it may be in the coming, still it begins to seek it. Let there be light, let there be beauty, let there be bliss, let there be harmony. All the outer experiences of life contradict it. Such is the gap between the yearning and the change, distant change. Yet it continues to yearn. And it will continue to do that. As if a childlike finger laid on a cheek, reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe, an infant longing clutched the somber vast. Now you see, this is a very powerful image. How people say Sri Aurobindo is difficult. He is using such images in Savitri. It's an everyday image. A child, this longing is now like a child. And heedless mother is material nature, it says. It's okay. It is lying. Heedless mother. So it is touching its cheek and saying, wake up, mama. I need milk. Mama, wake up. So material nature, she will wake up now. Because that's where the aspiration has to be lit. as if a childlike finger laid on a cheek, reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe, an infant longing clutched the somber vast. So suddenly, it brings a longing in the heart. It's very interesting that when children are born, spontaneously, the body of a mother, milk begins to outpour because it needs that. So a longing begins to wake up, stir the somber vast. Insensibly, and the moment it happens, then the third movement starts. Insensibly, somewhere a breach began. A long, lone line of hesitating you, like a vague smile tempting a desert heart, troubled the far rim of life's obscure sleep. So there is a longing in material nature. See, you can put it like a beautiful story. That's how Puranic stories are there, no? कि पृथ्वी के अंदर पुकार उठी, पृथ्वी गई भगवान के पास. Look at it. So पृथ्वी is material nature. At least it has become material nature. And then slowly she is somewhere, there is a longing waking up, and suddenly a long lone line of agitating you. Now what is this image? Again, transition from darkness to light. So now you see there is a phase when actually you get a feeling the morning has started. But still that first glow is yet to come, but it's almost there. You get a feeling it's almost there. And look at Sri Aurobindo just as a great artist when he paints an image. He takes into cognizance all the shades. What minute perfection Sri Aurobindo is taking into taking into account all the shades of human nature, and how things emerge. I mean, everything. And there is a reason, because that is a perfect description of how things happen. So, as a result of it, a breach begins. But still, life is in a state of obscure rim. It is feeling troubled. Then arrived from the other side of boundlessness, an eye of deity peered through the dumb deeps. A scout in a reconnaissance from the sun. Then light pierces through and touches. It is still not the full glow, but scout from the reconnaissance, you see. So reconnaissance is someone who goes first to find out what's happening. So reconnaissance from the sun. Eye of deity, the sun god. It seemed amid a heavy cosmic rest, the torpor of a sick and weary world, to seek for a spirit, soul, and desolate, too fallen to recollect forgotten bliss. So it is come to remind, to push that you are not a fallen being. Who are we? Amritasya putra, Anandasya putra. From that moment, this is the cry. But to reclaim that state, we have to go through all the night, which will come now in different layers, different ways. It will come to block the way. Intervening in a mindless universe, its message crept through the reluctant hush. So all the images are when the divine touch comes initially. While the first is very beautiful because it's the touch and you wake up. But then resistances come up. It felt like a trouble, doubts. It is felt like a reluctant hush. So all these states through which a yogi's journey goes through, because it has to struggle through that. It's not like it's so easy, now I have the touch and I am going to progress like this. Many such states will come through which one has to navigate through. But it's bound to happen because the waking up has started from there. That is the great assurance. Calling the adventure of consciousness and joy. Anandasya putra, wake up. What? Wake up for what? What job are you giving me? Come for the great adventure of consciousness and joy. So you see, when Krishna comes and calls, who responds? Some gop and gopis. At one place, Sri Aurobindo speaks in one of the aphorism, I have not come here to create mutts and sannyasis, but to call the souls of the strong to the Leela of Krishna and Kali. This is the reason for which creation is there. Where did we become so weak, chicken-hearted, Oh, creation is so bad, let's go away, mukti, moksha. You see, this pessimistic attitude which entered spirituality, I think it's a very dark passage. That's even spirituality got corrupted by this virus and became so depressing. You are taught, दुनिया तो ऐसी है. अरे बनाने वाले ने ऐसी बना दी. नहीं नहीं, वो कोई माया थी, बनाने वाले के अधीन नहीं थी. नहीं, वो अलग है. सो दैट इज हाउ द्वैतवाद केम. इजंट इट स्ट्रेंज पैराडॉक्स? ये क्या बना दिया है? अच्छा, जो भी है, यू कम आउट ऑफ इट. This question which remained unanswered, which gave to spirituality a very pessimistic flavor. Now Sri Aurobindo is calling this whole thing, see how he's starting. He's starting that bliss. You have fallen into coma. Wake up, know your nature. Like Hanuman being woken up. That you say you can't cross the ocean. When you were a child, you could reach out to the sun. And you say you can't cross the ocean, that famous when Jamwant narrates. It's a very beautiful passage. So similarly, his starting point is there. Wake up. Wake up to what? Yoga? No, adventure of consciousness and joy. It's a new way of looking at yoga. What is yoga? It's a great adventure. Mother has used the word, the supreme adventure. And she says that that adventure spirit is necessary. It's not like yoga as a safe journey from here to here, everything should be told to me. It's not. There is unexpected. Calling the adventure of consciousness and joy, and conquering nature's disillusioned breast, compelled renewed consent to see and feel. Disillusioned because previous attempts, it couldn't work out. So there are some people who are born with, that kind of pessimistic tendencies because past efforts. But look toward the future. A thought was sown in the unsounded void. A sense was born within the darkness depths. A memory quivered in the heart of time. See, life is blossoming slowly up in material nature. All this process has started. Thought and life and sense. As if a soul long dead were moved to live. So the qualifier here is as if, because soul never dies. So as if the something very fundamental had given up and had gone to, as if it had died, was again moved to live. But the oblivion that succeeds the fall had blotted the crowded tablets of the past, and all that was destroyed must be rebuilt, and old experience labored out once more. So all this is not new. This is not the first time that this is not the first creation. There have been several successive creations. Why? They were necessary. They plunged. Every time there was a fundamental gain before the final leap. So it has been said that there are 6 creations. It is there said in our scriptures also that this is the 7th one. The mother also says this is the 7th one. She adds that it is the final one for the next step, after which there will be several creations, but they will be in light and knowledge. And science also says that there have been at least 5, possibly 6 ice ages. Nobody knows what happened before that. So it all corresponds well. That and why it dissolves and comes up. So the image that I have in mind, which had come to me, is like those who do that hammer throw. No, so you must have seen what do? They swing it around. If you capture this in a slow motion, so when the thing is here, you will say ki it is far. When it goes behind, it has gone back. Then it is going in the same cycle as if meaninglessly, if you don't know what's going to happen. But in this pursuit, it is gaining momentum. That's why Sri Aurobindo says many approximations are justified. Because you gain momentum, you gain speed, you gain strength. For the final launch, it's not possible like you will, you can't leap to the sun like that. So there are many. Yes, yes, and we have to prepare ourselves for that. So through all these, so it is being revived again. And then he comes with this master line that don't worry, there is the Paramaswasan. Aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshyashyami masucha. Here comes such a great assurance, promise of the Lord. All can be done if the God touch is there. You don't have to worry. It's my job. He is saying it's my job. Creation is my job. So what's my job, Lord? You trust me. Have faith. Hope into me. Nobody is asking you to change the world. This is a meaningless activity you are engaged in. World will change. I will change it. So you know what happens when people read about this is a yoga world transformation. So they start thinking now I must become an activist and start changing everything. That's not what Sri Aurobindo has said. He has given us a sense and meaning and purpose, and that the divine is changing it in that direction. You also open and become part of that change, and the more you change, the more the world will change in that direction. This is the logic. Unlike Mayavad, where it says it's an incorrigible error. But it's no way of the yogin that, oh, now I must plunge into this activism, that activism, because now the world is changing and world must change. Sri Aurobindo has said that. So here he is saying that it will change. Why it will change? Because God touch is there. The Paramaswasan. All will change. Why? Because God touch is there. We should feel everything. We should not become insensitive, indifference. But we must know that the world is ultimately in safe hands. Mother said that, that you must know that the divine has taken charge of this world. When somebody was very worried and asked about India's condition, because at one place he said, India must be saved from the Indians. So true. Now it looks like she has told this yesterday, isn't it? So true. So then the person got very worried. Who will do it? So he wrote back, Mother, you had said that India must be saved from the Indians. How to do it? He said, you must know that the Supreme is looking into it. You don't have to do it. I have told you that it will be saved. It has to be saved. How it will be saved? Instruments will be created. All that is my business. Don't think that now it is a task given to you. I didn't add a line that India must be saved from Indians and you must do it. I am appointing you as the in charge. No, it's my job. But this is the problem and it will be done. So don't worry. So it's a grand relief. So what comes first? See, from the dissolution, a hope stole in that hardly dared to be. See this creation when it begins to rise, then one of the first things that wakes up on a positive note is hope. So in Savitri you will see that when she entered the territory of death, she enters into darkness. This whole experience will be relived in great detail. So she goes into utter inconscience. Then there comes a time when everything seems to be blotted out. Even Savitri loses contact with Satyavan, even as if she doesn't know. And then suddenly, out of her being, a light emerges. And that light tortures death. It feels that now my end has come. And that light is hope. So, hope. It comes much later. So that's why I said this is a summary. So this whole passage which you have seen slowly, darkness being teased, feeling it like a torture, all this will come when Savitri will enter into the realm of death and slowly try to win back Satyavan from there. The whole story is repeated. So this is the first thing which emerges is hope. That's why it is said Of course, best is if you have aspiration. If not aspiration and will, then faith. If not faith, hope. If hope is gone, then that's when everything is lost. So, as long as hope is there, nothing is lost. You can rebuild a whole world with that. So, few more lines we can read and then stop. Amid the night's forlorn indifference, a hope stole in that hardly dared to be amid the night's forlorn indifference, as if solicited in an alien world with timid and hazardous instinctive grace, orphaned and driven out to seek a home, an errant marvel with no place to live. Into a far off nook of heaven there came a slow, miraculous, rapture's dim appeal. The persistent thrill of a transfiguring touch persuaded the inert black quietude, and beauty and wonder disturbed the fields of God. So, this passage we will read again. We will stop here, but this passage we will read again because now it's actual transition taking place. So you see what is being described here is outwardly it is passage from darkness to night, and an outward looking person will say, oh, yeah, he has described a very vivid image. Poetry, great poetry, because what an image. But it is the description of creation. It is also the description of our soul which has plunged into darkness and is emerging out. And you can apply it in everyday life, because don't we go through mini cycles when life seems hopeless? When we feel that there is nothing worth living, or when there is just an intense restlessness, not knowing where to go, how to go. So these are phases. So we all go through, just like it is said that behind each cycle of Satyug, Treta, Dwapar and Kalyug, you have mini cycles. So similarly, in our individual life, we have beautiful moments when we are on ascension and moments when we are as if down. And then we start again. And of course, every day and night, it is the same process.